Good evening. My name is Joan Robichaux, and I'm the president of the Special Education PTO here in Simsbury, and I'd like to welcome you to this evening's event, a panel discussion with our first responders. It's an initiative to bring together our first responders here in Simsbury and families with special needs children. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. There are yellow sheets in the audience. We'd love to hear some feedback on ideas for future events that you would like us to hold. There's also white pieces of paper to pass along a question or comment to the panel for the panel discussion that we'll be having this evening. But before I jump into the evening's event, I'd like to take a moment to do some public service announcements.
That's okay, got it.
Thank you, Sue. So in preparing for tonight's event, I was out on the internet looking at our first responder websites, and there's a lot of great information out there. And I thought I'd bring some key items that I ran across to this event tonight. One of the things I'd like to do is remind all of us to number our households. It's imperative that first responders have a quick and immediate access to your house number so they can get to your loved one as quickly as possible. Those numbers should be in a reflective material and no less than 3 inches tall. And I love the reminder on the website that said during the snowfall season, be sure to clear the area so that those numbers are exposed. Secondly, Officer Lassard is going to talk a little bit about some legislation that was passed this week requiring gun locks in the home. There's a program here in town, Project Child Safe, that provides gun owners with access to free gun locks. So we'll be hearing a little bit more about that. Don't forget that new moms and dads can always stop by the police department and get a car seat check for their newborn. This was a great one that I hadn't heard about before. When you are selling or purchasing an item on an internet site like Craigslist, did you know that you can meet the buyer or purchaser in the lobby of the Simsbury Police Department to make that exchange in a safe location? The lobby is under camera video surveillance 24 hours a day, and there's a dispatcher behind the glass 24 hours a day. So consider using the lobby when making those transactions. Something else I learned is that Simsbury is a heart-safe community, and we'll be hearing from Russ Ragenauer tonight about some of the opportunities that Simsbury residents have to get CPR trained and trained to participate in that program. And lastly, and we're going to go forward there, Sue, thanks. We put together this quick snapshot of emergency first responder contact information. And if you'd like, those are located at the end of the aisles or up on the screen. Go ahead and take a picture of that and save it to your contact list under first responders. You know, we don't want to wait, or tonight is all about not waiting until an emergency to plan. And that's a simple way that you'd have quick access to the phone numbers you need to contact these departments to come to your assistance. Okay. So I'm going to hand it over to Sue Lemke. Sue is our Assistant Superintendent, Pupil Services here in Simsbury. She's a member of our SEPTO board, and she's joining us tonight as part of the panel.
Great, welcome everyone. Very excited to be here. Certainly, when we are working with your children here in the Simsbury Public Schools, the most important thing, and I always say, is we need to make sure that before we can teach kids, we have to make sure that they're safe. So the Simsbury Public Schools has taken many actions to put together some pretty consistent protocols in emergency situations, so that no matter if a student is a kindergartner at Squadron Line, then let's say moves to another part of town and then becomes a fourth grader at Tooten, then they matriculate to Henry James Middle School, and then finally the high school, that emergency language will stay consistent in all of those settings and across settings. So this is what we call our standard response protocol. Unfortunately, we are at a kind of a time and a place in our society where we have to practice emergency drills, specifically if there was an emergency situation of an intruder in our building. That's what we call a lockdown. So we use the language of lockdown, locks, lights, out of sight, and that is clear messaging to our students that if we were ever in that type of an emergency situation, our job is to make sure that we are out of sight and as quiet as possible so that our first responder colleagues can come in and eliminate any threat that might be in the building. But again, consistency in language is the largest takeaway that I would like the audience to have, that we need to be consistent in how we're presenting, how we are practicing. So in the unfortunate situation where we would have to really move into a real situation, that students and staff would know what to do and how to respond. Certainly, we also have another protocol if there is a concern outside of one of our school buildings. Let's say there's some kind of activity. Many times our police officer, our police department would be contacting the schools to say, we have a situation. Certainly, you can go about the business within your schools, but we would like you to be put on what's called lockout, meaning that we secure our perimeter. We don't let anyone in the building, nor do we let anyone out of the building, but certainly we can conduct business as usual. So again, using this standard response protocol language develops consistency in practice and clear understanding among all parties, our students and our adults, so that we can respond accordingly in an emergency. We also have language if there was a natural occurrence of some kind of a weather emergency that we had to respond to. And again, this is language that we explicitly teach our students from, I should say, preschool until they are seniors in high school and beyond. And we always share that these are drills that we're practicing, so as to not cause undue stress or alarm. Certainly, I'm very cognizant for some students with specific needs, and we really individualize those practices for our students and with those adults, but again, we keep the consistent language. So I think that was the largest part that we do as educators. Certainly, it's also depending upon your students' needs relative to response and emergency. We do a lot of individual and again direct teach. Certainly for some of our students, we explicitly teach what good touch and inappropriate touch is. If that's ever a situation, we want to make sure that students can plan for that and respond accordingly. So we do a lot with individualized students and students' plans, also kind of beyond our first responder, to ensure safety, because certainly that's our number one priority.
Thank you, Sue, for giving us that summary from an educator's perspective. What I'd like to do is move along to our first responders and have you speak briefly about, first of all, introduce yourselves, and then speak briefly about what you're doing, your organizations are doing to prepare for a first response to a family with a special needs child at home.
Well, thank you. I'm Russ Reagan from Simsbury Volunteer Ambulance Association, and thank you for inviting us tonight. What I would say is, first just start stepping back for a second. We do try and interact with the broader community. You mentioned the Heart Safe program. It's something our Executive Director and Chief of Service worked on a couple years ago to get Simsbury to be recognized as a heart safe community, which means there's a certain percentage of the population that has learned CPR, and there's a certain number of AEDs in town that are available in the case of a cardiac emergency. And, on that point, I would just urge everyone watching here tonight, if you don't know CPR, it's really something you should learn. The best chance for anyone really surviving a cardiac incident is good CPR given as soon as possible. And if you're ever in a building and there's an AED, and even if you don't know CPR or you've never used an AED, turn it on. It'll actually walk you through step by step what to do. Moving on to the special needs community. What we are really concerned with in the medical field when we show up for calls is, understanding one, what's happened to the person, but two, them assessing what we call baseline, what is their normal, and that's where families especially can assist us in understanding what's going on with the person. One of the things we train for is we understand there are a number of calls, especially non-traumatic calls, where we're perfectly prepared to spend a half an hour on scene if that's what it takes to get a proper assessment. Our biggest concern in a lot of calls is just calming the situation down, calming the person. A big part of that is communication. And again, that's where we may lean on the families. What is normal? Is the repetitive motion they're doing something that they normally do, or repeating phrases? One of the things we train for, or we'll pay attention to, is what we call the scene size up. You can have situations where the parents are unaware and a child has gotten into some medication or something else, a potential hazard. And, so we'll be watching out for those as well. Along those lines, we'd urge you to take proper care of all your pharmaceuticals, make sure they're not accessible to children. Having a med list if your child's taking regular medications, have that written out and stored on they sell vials. You can just put it on your refrigerator with a magnet. Those can be very handy, especially if something should go on and you're not there at the child's home and there's a caretaker who may not be as familiar with them. One other thing I'd mention in terms of planning is one of the things we do is we try and get out and meet with different community groups. We are available. We can arrange trips to schools so we can, work with the children so they have an idea of when an ambulance comes, why are we coming? We're there to help them. What's inside the ambulance? Take some of the anxiety out of that. So in the event you do need us, or we do have to attend to them, there's a little more familiarity with that. And for anyone who's involved, I used to coach the Challenger baseball. For any group like that's where you're looking for parents to get trained in some basic medical care or CPR, that type of thing, just reach out to us at simsburys.com and we'd be happy to help.
Thank you.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm Jim Baldus. I'm the fire chief of the Simsbury Volunteer Fire Company. It's a pleasure to be here tonight to address all of you. And we're very fortunate in Simsbury to where we have a group of volunteers. We're 95 members strong. And these are your neighbors. These are the parents, the sons and daughters, the students who actually live in town and who are responding to your emergency needs. That gives us a very unique opportunity because many of these are familiar faces, and especially in a special needs situation or in neighborhood situations, seeing that familiar face is oftentimes very calming and can be very, very helpful. So we really stress that among our membership in terms of when they're going to these emergency calls, how important it is to represent themselves in an appropriate manner, and also to make sure that if they're familiar with the family or familiar with those needs, to try to do what they can to try to calm the situation down. Certainly, as everybody I'm sure is aware, the situations for us to respond can be very traumatic at times. We're responding to fires, we're certainly responding to accidents, where someone's really having a very difficult time and a bad day. You don't necessarily know what exactly you're going to be coming upon. So it's important for all of our members and responders to understand, exactly what they could be in fact getting involved in, and to try to mitigate the emergency as calmly and as quickly as possible. The other thing that's important for us as well is the fact that we do have 6 stations throughout town. There's not any one location that's any more than 4 miles from any resident in town. That gives us a tremendous response capability to where we can be on scene very, very quickly. Many members will respond right from their own homes. Others will go to the fire stations to get the appropriate equipment to then respond to where the emergency may be. So here again, we're able to get people on scene very, very quickly, but understanding again the potential for a special need, a disability, or some other unique factor that may impact our ability to respond, our ability to mitigate that emergency is very important for us, and we'll do what we can to communicate that information very carefully. We work very closely with our police department and the EMS departments, communicating together, sharing information, so again, we can respond appropriately to whatever the situation, the emergency may be. We have trained personnel. You'll hear more about the Project Lifesaver program with the police department. We have trained personnel on the fire department to work with that Project Lifesaver program. We continue to express and teach sensitivity training to our members, so again, they can be more calming in terms of situations that they may come upon. Something else that maybe our residents don't necessarily know is that each fire station, while they're not manned, this is a volunteer organization, so the main station is manned 24 hours a day with our dispatcher. But every station has what's referred to as a call box. There's a red box that says emergency on the outside of the firehouse. And if you pick up that phone, you're instantly connected to the police department. You have the dispatcher right there at your hand, so if anybody needs emergency services and they're driving through town, they can stop at a firehouse and pick up one of those call boxes to immediately get the dispatcher of the police department on the phone. It's a direct connection, and therefore the service can then be provided as needed. The other thing that we also are very involved in is education for fire prevention purposes. We do school visits constantly, but we encourage our families to spend time working with their children, especially in the special needs community, to understand what it means when the fire alarm goes off, what it means when that detector or CO detector goes off in terms of how to safely and effectively get out of the home and to protect themselves and what to do. The other thing that we also encourage is visits to the fire stations, or we are more than happy to arrange visits to your home. If it would mean that the child or the adult would feel more comfortable seeing in their setting some of our equipment, we'd be very, very happy to make those arrangements, and certainly by contacting us at the firehouse or even through our website, which is simsburyfire.org, you can quickly get a hold of us, and we'd be very, very happy to arrange a visit from your local fire station. So this will again allow the neighbors who are maybe in your neighborhood to meet you and to understand maybe the situations that they have as well. The other thing that we also do provide for is Knox boxes. What a Knox box is, it's a key vault. A key vault can be mounted to your home. You actually purchase it through the firehouse. It's a very secure system that allows us to get access to your home in the event of emergency. It could be a disability situation where someone's fallen, they can't get up. We have the ability of being able to get into the home without having to force our way in. We will do what it takes to get into the house if necessary. But sometimes it's a lot easier just to have a key in hand, and these are very, very protected keys. They're very limited access in terms of who can access the Knox box key. And this allows that peace of mind for entry. And finally, the other thing that we do, unfortunately, it's one of those situations in today's society, as Sue had mentioned earlier, is we are involved very, very closely with the EMS and the police department in terms of tactical responses. Whether it's in the school or other public venues, we work hand in hand to again, protect the community and be involved and ready to respond in the event that we have one of those more unfortunate situations.
Hi, hello. My name is Officer J.P. Lazard. I've been a police officer here with the town of Simsbury, going into my 8th year in law enforcement. I'm currently serving as the community services officer. And, you know, being a police officer, there's so many different facets of our job and what we have to do, whether it's responding to medical cases or responding to a motor vehicle accident or, you know, an active threat situation. But, you know, it's dealing with and helping out our community with families that have children with mental illness, you know, special needs, and it's what we do as a department when it comes to training and the resources that we have not only for our police officers but for those in our community that really sets us apart. So as this panel goes on, I'd like to talk more about the different type of training that we do go through. Say again?
You can go ahead and do that now.
Oh, okay. So, you know, as a police officer, the first thing that we're going to do is we go to the police academy. When we're at the police academy, we're going to go through basic training where they're giving us the foundation and the building blocks for dealing with and help policing those with mental health and special needs. Well, when we get back to the police department, we have specialized trainers at our department that we do regular, whether it be weekly, monthly, yearly training in with the Simsbury Police Department. But we also go through a yearly in-service training with the West Hartford Police Department, where we have specialists come out, whether they're clinicians or they're coming from DMS or DDS or DCF and all these different agencies that work closely with law enforcement. They're putting on training for us as well. So what we're doing is we're giving our officers more tools, more resources, more training when it comes to helping those in the community that are, or the families that are affected with, you know, special circumstances pertaining to their loved ones. The Simsbury Police Department has a goal right now of getting all of our officers through the crisis intervention training. It's a fantastic program. It's a very intense 1-week, 40-hour course, really geared towards like more of the clinical side of mental illness and special needs. And currently we have about 23 officers that have gone through that program, and they are identified with a special badge. So we'll be able to put that out as well. But what it does is it allows us to have more officers on the road between, you know, the first shift, the second shift, and the third shift, because we are a 24-hour organization, 365 days a year. Whenever you call, one of us will be there, whether it's a police officer, a firefighter, or an EMS worker. You know, we are all getting the specialized training to, you know, better assist those in our community. We want to make sure at the police department, when we're having a interaction with any member of our community, that it is compassionate, that it is tailored, that it is a white glove professional service 100% of the time with everybody that we interact with. I think that's what really sets us apart, is the initiative that we have at the department and the amount of training and the strong abilities and officers that we are hiring and the education that we're putting forth. And I really think one of the big things that really needs to come out of this event here today is information. If I can harp on one word today, it's going to be information. And the more information that is provided to the first responders and to the school is going to allow us to tailor our response for your family's individual needs. And that is so important, because in an emergency situation, whether we have a medical need where I arrive on scene first, but I need to talk to Russ and let him know what's going on, because we all see each other every single day in emergency situations. If I have more information on, you know, while I'm responding to the call that the dispatchers can put out specifically pertaining to your child or your loved one, that is less time that I have to spend on scene, as Russ said, doing the scene size up, because I already have that information. And we'll get into the child packet a little bit later, the information that we're looking to get specifically. And what it's doing is it's saving time, and saving time means saving more lives, and ultimately that's what we're here to do. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I just want to acknowledge the reception that we've received when we've approached our first responder departments with this initiative, and their dedication to training and learning and adapting as more is known in this effort. I'd like to shift gears a little bit, and we've invited Shannon Nall, both a parent and advocate and representative of the Aging and Disability Commission here in Simsbury. And Shannon doesn't know this, but she's really the seed that inspired this event tonight. We were fortunate to get the Nall family back in Simsbury after a hiatus in the Midwest. And it was Shannon who posted on Facebook that she took her 18-year-old child down to the police department so that they could meet him and get to know him. And I thought we should all be doing that. So thank you for that, Shannon, but thank you to our first responders for your overwhelming desire to visit homes, have us come in, get to know us, and our kids. I can't even say how excited and proud I am to be in this community. But Shannon, I'm going to hand it over to you for a few minutes, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about the family experience and what's waiting behind the door for our first responders. What are some of the challenges we face? What we want you to know about our loved ones, how you can help us, but more importantly, what's our role as families in helping first responders?
Good evening, everyone. I'm so honored to be here. Honestly, Joan, thank you so much for including me. And what a treat it is to sit with people who get it. I always say that we need more people who get it so that we can continue to form these community partnerships, which are so vital to the success and safety of our families. I want to start actually with the incident that Joan mentioned. When we were moving back to town, we were not moving into an area where my oldest son, who is on the autism spectrum, could walk a lot. And he likes to walk a lot. And when he walks, he's usually singing and jumping, and he's very joyful. To me, it's a reflection of the joy that he finds in his singing. But to the average person on the street, that might look a little different, because he's 6'1" and leaping down County Road, so it might be a little alarming. So I did want the police department to understand who he was, in case anyone should question that or need more clarification. And I will have to say that the chief was phenomenal about that, so I'm very grateful to the police department for that. So what you can find behind our doors, I will be very honest with you.
Not too much. Yeah.
No, well, I like to keep it real, because this is really what our lives are like. And honestly, you could get something different from hour to hour in our house, and I think that's important to understand. I want to emphasize that living with a child on the autism spectrum, communication and effective communication are probably our biggest challenge. We do know that with an inability to communicate comes behavior. So that behavior can look like yelling, it could look like a total meltdown on the floor, it could look like anything that is unique to that child. So I think it is incumbent on us as parents and our partners in the community to make sure that we understand that And also along the lines of, autism specifically is a spectrum disorder. So while it may affect one person in one way, it will affect another person in a different way. And I do believe at the root of all of that, communication is still our biggest challenge, no matter where that person is on the spectrum. So I would encourage members of the community, and particularly first responders, to really get to know people on different points of the spectrum. You could say, someone who is profoundly affected by autism may have a certain set of challenges, but someone who is, labeled as having a high-functioning autism might have a different set of challenges that is not readily visible. They may be very verbal, for instance, but still unable to communicate effectively. Or be overwhelmed by language or touching or lack of touching or having a sensory reaction to a situation. Okay. Oh, I wanted to bring this up too because this has happened in our lives. There is a very literal interpretation of language by some of our kids, loved ones, adults. So I will give you an example. Many years ago, very early in the morning, my son decided to get up and make some toast in the toaster. And the toaster caught on fire. And because he had been, thankfully trained at school to dial 911, he did dial 911 while chucking the toaster out the front door into a snowbank. So when, as my husband and I were kind of like, what the heck has just happened here in the morning? The fire department was arriving on the scene because he had done what he was supposed to do and called them, when it was really a very minor incident that he had actually taken care of by throwing the toaster in the snowbank. But these are sort of the things that come along with our families. Another time he had read a story about Elmo being a criminal or something, and we were at a party and he discovered Elmo in a room. Unbeknownst to the host, he called the police department because Elmo was in the room and Elmo was a criminal. So the police showed up at this party. So it's like you never know what you're going to get, or what the interpretation is by the person who is impacted by what they see as a very critical emergency. And I guess in sort of piggybacking on that, a lot of our kids with disabilities, we kind of compartmentalize them into always being children. And they do grow up and they become full-on adults, but don't necessarily lose their childlike mentality. So we might see a 6'1" adult male walking down the street, and as you try to explain something to him, his mentality or his ability to process that is not of an 18-year-old, it is that of a 6 or a 7-year-old or what have you. So very important to keep in mind. I think I've covered everything. Did I cover everything? Oh, yeah, well, as I said earlier, my role is definitely to be a partner. And I want you to ask questions, and I want people to let me help them understand what it is like and how they can help our families. So that has always been my goal, whether it be in the community or whether it be in the legislative work that I do. And it is all about partnerships and making sure that we are all on the same page as we try to keep our loved ones safe and enjoy each other in the community.
Thank you, Shannon. I would just add to that as a parent, having gone through something with a family member in the last week. I just want to remind us as parents not to forget that there's a living, breathing, thinking soul inside that human being that we're representing often to our first responders. and to the best of our ability to communicate what we can with our child, with our adult children, and include them in decision-making around their own personal health needs, often. For me, it's about treating the person with dignity and including them where I can and letting them make some decisions. I was taught by Deb Service here in town to often just stop when I'm being asked a question about my daughter and say, I don't know, ask her. So I try to practice that with when she's interacting with professional first responders, and let her emerge as her own voice whenever possible. Okay? And I think the more practice our kids can get interacting with first responders, the better they're going to be when they are adults. So thank you for that, Shannon. And I would throw on, how things change hour to hour. A change in medication dose can cause an extreme reaction in a child. Often as parents, we are doing the best we can when first responders arrive. And I know it's hard to prepare for an emergency. We're exhausted. And when the moments are free and good, the last thing we want to do is spend planning for an emergency. But I promise you, if you do some of the things that we're going to talk about in the next few minutes, and the idea of buying one of those little pouches you put on the refrigerator with the medication list and other pertinent medical information, that's a go-to in an emergency when we're in overwhelm, and that's a lot of information we could be sharing with the first responders by just grabbing it and handing it to them. So thank you, Shannon. What I'd like to do is take another left turn. And, Sue, you kicked us off talking a little bit about what our educators do at school. And as a parent, I've often felt like, okay, I trust my child's getting the training on emergency at school, but I feel unprepared with language and prompts in the real world should an emergency happen. So I'd like to share with the audience some things that I found on the internet by visiting the Simsbury Police Department's website. I was led to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and some tools that are out there. And I think I'm excited to share with the parents that some of these little tools that you can use at home to familiarize your child with emergency language, to familiarize ourselves with emergency language and how to talk to our children about it. Because up until now, I felt completely unequipped to have that conversation should a fire happen, for example. Can I ask you to forward the slides for me? So I went out and I got some screenshots of some of the tools that I was able to access through the Simsbury Police Department website. One more, Sue, thank you very much. So if you, why don't we actually, I'm going to go here. Located on the Town of Simsbury website under Police Emergency, you'll find this page, Emergency Child Info Packet. I'm going to pay attention, we're going to come back to that packet, but I'm going to pay attention to this information at the bottom of the screen. So on this screen, you'll find a link to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's homepage. And if you forward that slide, there's 3 specific links, one more, Sue, that I'd like to call your attention to. This one has videos and tools and programs that assist both parents and educators in having conversations with your children about internet safety. That could be a whole event on its own, so I'm just going to touch upon that. And I will be putting these links out on our Simsbury SEPTO Facebook page following this event. So if you check in there tomorrow, you'll be able to access some of these tool links there. We're going to go to the next one. This was one of my favorite ones. So these are actually stories, again, videos. If anybody knows the show Sid the Science Guy, which I love, it's an animation program. They have videos and animations with characters like that around what to do in a fire, how to say no, check with an adult, different topics. So we're going to go to the next slide. And some of us, in Simsbury anyway, parents, are familiar with these type of story boards. The News to You news and reading program that my daughter's been using since grammar school has used this type of story. Sorry, it's behind you, Shannon. But some children are better equipped to learn information when you pair words with visuals. So these stories do that for us. Different topics: tell people no, tell my trusted adults, check first are some of these. There's the fire safety and other things. So I've printed these out and I've laminated them, and my plan is to read these stories like they were bedtime books with my daughter. And I think we could do this beginning at a young age to help us have those conversations with our children. We're going to go to the next slide. Those storyboards come along with crossword puzzles and match games, fill in the blanks, other visuals that can make those experiences between the parent and the child entertaining and fun. And then this is an app. So there are apps out there that allow us to have a current photograph and other statistical information about our child readily on hand, should, God forbid, there be an abduction or a missing child incident. So this is one that I got through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and I thought I'd share that with you. On to the next one. Okay. And I just wanted to show you again where those links can be found on the police emergency website. And on to the next one. So we kind of changed our order here. Thanks for your flexibility, everybody. And now I think we'll change gears and get into our... Oh, actually, sorry, Officer Lassard, why don't we take a moment to talk about the Project Lifesaver and the Child Safety Questionnaire. So Shannon, I believe it was you who brought the Project Lifesaver program to the Simsbury Police Department. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And then we'll hand off to Officer Lassard to talk about what you're doing now and an invitation to parents to participate, and then we'll move into the questionnaire. Thank you.
I'm going to defer a lot of that to you because it's been a couple of years since we did this, but I think again, thank you to the Simsbury Police Department, because I brought this to Nick Walter at the time, and he was so receptive of starting the program. As the police department has always been, let's figure out a way to make this happen. however we need to do that. So Project Lifesaver is really, it's a national organization that seeks to, again, partner between people affected by disabilities or Alzheimer's, anyone who is prone to wandering, and pair that person with a police department in their community, so that if that person happens to wander away, elopement is a huge problem within the autism community, that person is, for lack of a better word, trackable, findable, rescuable. And the police department is in turn trained in how to do that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to pass this down
Okay.
for the officials.
So Project Lifesaver is something very unique to the Simsbury Police Department. We are one of very few agencies here in Connecticut, in the Northeast, that partake and participate in the Project Lifesaver program. And we say Project Lifesaver like expecting you guys to know exactly what it is. So what it is it's our ability to quickly track, locate, and rescue, safeguard an individual who is prone to wandering. It's not just for special needs, it's not just for somebody who might be on the spectrum who is prone to elopement, but we're also seeing a very strong increase in our senior community, those especially experiencing dementia or the onset of dementia, and they're starting to become confused, and their day-to-day operations are now they're taking a turn, and they think they're doing what they're doing, but somehow 5 minutes later they're across the street, and we need the ability, one, to identify them with the families, so we need to get the education out to the families on how to identify these different characteristics, but also the education to let the people in town know that we do have this program. And so what it is it's the securing of a transmitter to either an ankle or a wrist, and it's about the size of a wristwatch, no bigger than a Fitbit. It is a solid plastic beacon with a radio frequency transmitter inside. Each one has a specific and unique frequency that goes together in an information packet, and that way we know that if we respond to an emergency at this residence where a child or a grandfather or somebody's husband or wife has gone missing from the house, we have this giant packet of information readily accessible to the dispatchers, to the police officers. The information is already starting to go back and forth. As the fire chief said, they have firefighters on their staff already trained. We train every year together on how to use this program, and that goes into a whole different field of search and rescue, where the chief will be able to talk more about that. But what we have is we have this giant packet of information, we have photos, points of contacts, we have names, addresses, we have places that they normally tend to go. A big trend across the country, especially with those on the spectrum, is that they tend to go to a known location that is comfortable to them, that they feel that they've been there in the past. So if we have that information and we can start deploying our assets accordingly, then we can work on getting a speedy recovery of your loved one. However, what happens if that child becomes lost? What happens if it's in the middle of the night and they become disoriented and they should have taken a left, but now they're out into the woods and it's in the middle of the winter, they're not properly dressed? Climate exposure and, these types of situations start putting different curveballs in making the necessity for a speedy recovery more paramount than ever. So what we have here at the police department is we have two different receivers, and what we do is it almost looks like a old style television antenna, but similar to those like the DEP out there tracking bears with a radio frequency collar. We have a set of headphones, we have a receiver that we pre-program for that specific frequency, and we have officers who are trained to go out there and start monitoring the RF transmission that's coming from that wristlet, or that wrist bracelet, and we can start to work on honing in and closing in and finding your loved one. We've had several successful recoveries of not only children, but also adults that have gone wandering at all hours of the day. We have a immediate all hands on deck between not only the police department, the fire department, we'll call out the Volunteer Ambulance Association. We have a whole different protocol when it comes to reaching out to other agencies, requesting for outside assistance for police support, whether we need to get a helicopter in the air, whether we need to call for a canine unit from another agency to assist in hopefully a personnel track. There is a whole different aspect that comes into law enforcement and emergency response when trying to find somebody, because again, in our line of work, speed is what saves lives, and speed is what makes sure that when we're saving a life, that we're also making sure that they're coming home in the same condition that they left it.
Are we allowed to ask questions here? Because I got like 1,000.
Yeah, we're actually going to come to a panel second, right after this. So let's wrap this one up. But just a quick question on this. Does it cost anything to participate?
There
and then
is-
we're going to talk about the packet.
There is a fee that goes technically with the enrollment in Project Lifesaver. However, if assistance is needed, we can meet with myself and other members of the police department, potentially social services, and we can work on getting you the transmitter. That's the first thing we're going to do. If you need this product, if you need this device, we will get it on your loved one immediately. We will get you enrolled into the program. We're going to, again, work on tailoring our response, getting the information that we need, and then we'll figure that out.
So, JP, I want to congratulate you because when I checked out your website, I saw that the SPD already had a questionnaire out there, and I did some research and found other questionnaires. You immediately took on the challenge to look at all the questionnaires and make sure that the Simsbury's child questionnaire was up to date and most comprehensive. So thank you for doing that.
It was my first project as a
So, thank you. And the speed at which you did it was amazing. And the fact that you were looking to parents like me to provide you with feedback
Absolutely.
Was amazing. So say a parent doesn't want to do the full, that safety program you were just talking about, but would be interested in this idea. Can you share that with us?
So what we did is when Joan contacted me, she said, I want to see what we have going on between first responders and policing those with mental illness and special needs, and in particularly what type of information do we as parents have to get the first responders. So we took a look at the child information guide that we already had, and then I took information that you provided me, and I said, what do we have? How can we make it better? And where are we as an agency across the nation? How do we compare to other places? And like as you said before, like this is a living, breathing document, and it's so important that this document is ever changing. So Joan and I sat down and we had a great, very, enthusiastic meeting about, hey Joan, check this out. I just came up with this packet, and what do you think about it? So I took her information, her input, and she passed it out to some of her friends and colleagues, and they also went through it. We made some minor tweaks and changes, and we kind of came up with this packet. This packet of information is kind of like a crash course in, hi, this is my loved one, this is my family member. I have been safeguarding, protecting, learning every single thing I can about my child for the last how many years, and I'm going to try and put it on a 9-page packet just so we can try and catch you up to speed should you guys have to come to our house to provide assistance. So if for whatever reason you want to fill this packet out, we will be updating the one that's on the website. It's not currently, because this is still, this was approved. It's going to just, we have to work with the IT department to get it up on the website. But this has child's name, parent's information, address. This has all their personal data. It has the opportunity to set up a time to come down to the police department, meet with me one-on-one. We'll sit down, we'll have a nice private closed door conversation, tell me a little bit more. provide me with a picture. I'll take a picture. That way, if I take the picture, I can load it right into our database. In the dispatch office, we use a program called LEAS, L-E-A-S. We have the ability to take that digital photo, put it in our dispatch communications center, and that way, if we have an emergency, we can get it disseminated to our officers out in the field immediately. We don't want to have to go to your house and say, hi, do you have a photo of Sally? And you are digging through and blowing off the dust off of your photo albums, trying to pull out a photo from 10 years ago, or trying to find a way to transfer a picture from their most recent social media picture that they've taken. We have it. We want to make sure it stays up to date. So as we're going through, we're asking about what are the medical concerns? What type of medication are they taking? How often? What is the frequency? What happens if they don't take that medication? Is there something that is going to change the situation of how we're going to respond? As we go through the packet, there's basic questions. Is your child physically disabled? Do they know what their name is? Do they know their address? Are they scared of, strangers should they come across somebody? Do they feel confident enough to go up and be able to have a communication? Is there going to be a language or a effective communication barrier that, they might have to deal with? Do they feel confident enough that they're able to do so? These are all the questions that we're going to ask. Has your child ever wandered before? Do we need to make them a candidate, or are they a potential candidate for Project Lifesaver? And then we cue that initiative. And it's always building and always trying to provide more information. And again, this document needs to be updated regularly. We will create a file. It's kept with me inside my office. Nobody else has access to it except for emergency responders. And we'll continually add page, correct information, keep everything going. Where does your parents work? What school are they in? Great, you just said the school. I know who we're going to have contact with because they have an amazing database and they have amazing workers and employees that probably have an inside scoop or an inside look at how this person's operating. We have school resource officers. Not only do we have one here in Simsbury, we have two. Fantastic. So we have caregiver information, miscellaneous information, frequently visited places, where did this person like to go, and then at the very end, there is an open paragraph, open page. What else that I might have missed that you wish I would have asked? Please include that on here, and let's get all this information out. So it's so important when it comes to emergency response, having the information. As Chief Baldus and the ambulance personnel and speaking with Russ, it's time. It is the cutting of time that is so important in how we tailor our response.
So thank you for that. I just want to be clear. This document, there's a lot of personal information in there, so we understand that some families may not be comfortable with that, but I appreciated your position that you're willing to receive any bit of information, even if it's limited to have in your system.
100%.
This is not loaded in your database. This lives in a file in your office, and so realistically it does take some time to connect the dots, but in the profile online for that address, it will indicate that there's a file, there's a questionnaire in the file. Is that correct?
Well, we have the ability with our system to create an alert, whether that goes under the person's individual name and date of birth, or whether it gets cataloged underneath the residence in which we're responding. So we have multiple ways of keeping information compartmentalized and accurate, so we're not looking for it when the time comes. What we can do is we can add a majority of this information, and we can just take the caveats of it and put it in a note section of you responding to this address. This person is, there is a 9-year-old boy who lives at this residence. He might have a auditory or a visual, sensory component to what he's dealing with, and the fact that we have 5 police cars and 5 fire trucks all showing up on the scene with flashing lights and blaring sirens, and then people getting out in uniforms. We don't want to scare this child. We don't want to make the situation worse. So it's little bits of information that we can include into the file that helps us not make the situation worse, so we can work on bringing the best service and bringing order back to the family.
Thank you. Before, you're going to have to hold the crowd back here.
Okay.
I'm going to open up the audience, up to the audience. So you are welcome. Some of you have passed me forward some comments and questions. Some of those I believe have been answered. I will come pick up some more, or you're welcome to come down to the microphone.
I'm really loud.
You're loud, so yeah. We only have one microphone, so.
Right, yeah, they can have a microphone.
Yeah.
I prefer not. Regarding that programming, so some of our kids, the emergency, the wrist or ankle bracelet, some of our kids have huge sensory issues. And so I tried to use this program when you first got it, and the problem was it was very restricted. I got to put the strap on, it's got to stay on for 6 months. So we tried to see if we could get some prototypes so that our kids could practice wearing it. Wear it for 5 minutes, wear it for 10 minutes, and then you're going to build up that tolerance to this thing. So my son, he's a runner, and I need something like that, but he is not a candidate because he's not willing to let you put it on the day that it needs to be put on, and it's going to stay on for 6 months. So if you can get, the chief, I think he's who I talked to, it was somebody, and they were trying to contact the manufacturer to see if they could get some, what I would call duds, that we could use to practice with. We could put on and take off and put on and take off. So if that's a possibility, then I think that would go a long way to many of our kids that can't do it right off the bat.
Well, that's something I will look into. I will talk to our former community service officer, Detective Devon. She has taken a different position in the detective bureau, but she really took the lead on the Project Lifesaver program as well. So I'll ask her to see what we have, and if necessary, I'll take that initiative and I'll see what we can do to maybe there's something different. Right now, I only know of the one transmitter band that we have because that is what we have purchased. But if there's something different going on, I'll definitely take a look. In the meantime, if wandering is a significant concern or a risk, I don't know how we try.
We went down there, I introduced him to everybody, but you didn't have this program, because that's what I asked him. Can you take this picture? Can you take all this information? Because I think that's important that you know that. And there was no program at the time. So this is perfect for me. So I'll fill out the questionnaire.
Does your child have a smartphone?
No.
So in the meantime, if we aren't able to get a Project Lifesaver transmitter, maybe every child, for the most part, really enjoys having some sort of smart device or electronic device.
Trust me, we know.
We are.
It's a huge problem.
Yeah.
It's just not, for my child, it's not going to work. It's a perseverating activity. So that's all he'll do is stare at that phone 24 hours.
The track my iPhone GPS portion of that.
Yeah.
Might just need to be activated if that's an option, or whatever the other carriers have for a GPS locating for the actual device in the meantime. But I will get your information after the program, and I will track that down immediately.
Great.
I love it. So a couple of questions from. Oh, you have one?
But I don't.
Okay, no, I'm going to come right to you. I'll throw this one out. So Russ, can I find out where AED devices are located in town? How can I participate? Is there training coming up? Interested in CPR as well, as it's important to our families.
Yeah, so as far as CPR goes, we definitely offer CPR classes on a regular basis. And again, it's simsburyems.com, or just look us up in the phone and give a call during regular business hours. There'll be someone there to help out. As far as a listing of AEDs in town, that's a great question, and I'm actually unaware of that. Was actually rather surprised to find out a month or two ago that Stop and Shop actually didn't have one yet. So, but anyway, that's maybe something we can look at, and there might be something we could, an app or something, or a website we'd be able to adapt to have something like that on it.
might just also maybe add to that, just so the community is aware, again, every firehouse, even though they may not be occupied, that red box is very important. Every fire station in Simsbury has at least one. Many of them have multiple because we have them on the engines, and some of the fire stations do carry more than one. So there is AEDs located there, and a lot of the public buildings as well in town do have them, Simsbury Farms and so forth. So they are available, but certainly need to be more.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions about the transmitters.
Sure.
So I'll just ask all of my questions and then you can answer all of them. You can sit down.
Okay.
Okay, so are they easily removed or impossible to remove? I'm wondering about the technology behind them. Seems a little behind. It sounds like you have to have a device close to them to hone in on it. I'm wondering if there are changes on the horizon to that. That would make that a little bit easier. I have a lot of questions.
Well, let me start with those first.
Okay.
So the Project Lifesaver bands, they're not easily removed. So we actually, they are not
possible.
They're hard to come off. My son tried a long time.
Really?
Oh my, he was so mad.
Right, that's what I
He could
think.
not used to get it off.
So they are, I won't say impossible because I can't deal you an absolute, but they are very difficult to remove. The average teen and below is not going to be able to just pull this off by hand. The plastic housing on the transmitter itself is a very strong polymer. The bands are a braided nylon infused rubber plastic, and we actually have to take police or medical trauma shears and cut them off. And because they get put in and then they get riveted closed.
Is it bulky?
It's not. No, we have children in the program now who are swimming with it every day. They are waterproof. They're shockproof. That's what makes this a nice platform. Is because if we put a smart device on their wrist and then we have the child on a bicycle and they fall and they smash it, now we have a multi-$1,000 device.
And it has to take off to be charged.
That has to be charged, it has to pretty much be indestructible because it has to be kid-proof. And a lot of us, we all have children that are young and they are wild. And trying to not only contain them, but prevent them from breaking things is very difficult.
I think one question some parents would ask is, will wearing that distinguish their child from other children? Will it be
I don't.
something that will call attention to them?
So will
in a negative
the
way?
Project Lifesaver band bring attention to the child
In a negative way?
in a negative way? I don't personally believe so because it's not that easily identified. They've done a lot of time in research, developing the shape, the size, and location of where these things are placed. But it doesn't have to just go on their wrist. It can go on their ankle and something out of sight, out of mind. But it looks exactly just like a wristwatch, except it doesn't have the hands and arms with it. I don't know if they offer a newer, more up-to-date version of it. And again, I'm going to take a look into that for that gentleman.
And we can, if you just put this mic in the microphone, we can put up a picture of that on our Facebook page.
Yeah, I will
If you're
send
willing to
you,
give that to
I'll take
us.
a picture of it, I'll send you an email
Yeah.
about what the transmitter looks like, what the receiver looks like, and maybe I'll talk to the police department about maybe putting on a block instruction, maybe for a different panel, in conjunction with the fire department, and maybe videotape how it actually works, because there's a lot of questions on how the program works, and how the device works, and how we respond, and I think that's something that we could do. Okay.
Regarding the information that's collected, I'm not interested in protecting my daughter's personal information because the more you know, the safer she's going to be, both of my daughters with special needs. But I understand that that is a real and valid concern of a lot of people. And so, I mean, there's a huge discussion we could have on all of that, but it sounds like if all of that information is locked up, is it going to be accessible enough? I would love to see you get a call from my house, an alert comes up right away to the dispatcher who knows, okay, we know this house, these girls live here, this is what you need to know about them. Can parents individually choose what information is immediately in that database? You know what I'm saying? Because some parents might say, I don't want them to know everything, they can just have this here, I want you to know more, you know.
So that's a very important question, and what I think needs to be done is that this isn't just a packet that we're going to push out and fill it in, send it in, and we're going to stamp it number 1, number 2, number 3. This has to be a carefully thought out, very meticulously gone through packet, frequently updated, first at home, and then disseminated and to me at the police department, to other officers who might be in this position, because we have to have that intimate conversation. We have to be able to tailor our response. We have to be able to put the most important, if I could put this packet on the tab when your street address or your residence pops up on the screen, I wish we could, but I can't, not right now. But what I can do is I can enter your address. When your address pops up on the screen, there's a little tab that says alert. It flashes, it makes a noise, we tap on that. Our dispatchers are trained to automatically look for those alerts, and it brings up pertinent information. And it tells us where safety keys are stored. Is there firearms inside the homes? Is there a dog inside the home? Is there somebody with special needs inside the home? Well, if there is somebody with special needs, or if there is a certain criteria that we must know about when we respond to that address, that is where we're going to find it. So if, depending on how much information that we can put in that tab, in that alert tab, well, we will prioritize it with you when you sit down with, a police officer on what is the most important information. We really just need the broad picture. What are we walking into? Because all of our officers are first trained emergency responders. They're trained in medical, they are trained in criminal investigation, and with criminal investigation, we divulge a little more, and that is interviewing and getting basic information through a tactful line of questioning, whether that is a very direct line of questioning, or is it a very non-invasive, casual conversation. So that information coming out in the interview that we would have at the police department, on a one-on-one basis, especially with your loved ones, so I can get them, so I can actually meet them, so they can see a uniformed personnel. So we can set up, like we were talking about earlier, setting up a time to come down and do a sensory meet and greet with a police officer, to do a sensory meet and greet with the ambulance, to do sensory with the fire department. I think that's so important. And, here in Simsbury, I think we're so unique with all the different agencies that are here present that we are very enthusiastic about getting to meet you. We are very enthusiastic about sitting down at your table with your family and your friends and other people that you've met, in the same that's in the same wheelhouse as you, so we can provide the best service for you. I am very excited to go forward. If we get to meet going forward, I'd love to sit down with you. And I'd like to meet your family. I really would.
Thank you.
Are names flagged as well as addresses?
Yes.
So it sounds like in that interview with the packet, you and the family can make a determination as what high-level information could be flagged right in the database.
Yes.
Minimal but important, overarching information that allows first responders to react accordingly and know what they're walking into. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Yes.
Sorry, I'll get to it in a second, I promise.
Just as an educator and now as a resident here in Simsbury, I just do want to stress to the community that we do have a unique situation here where first responders are inviting these conversations and truly inviting a relationship to happen. And I do think that families have to individually decide to what degree they want to divulge certain information. I know that mental illness, there's a lot of stigma, quite frankly, around mental illness, and we might be hesitant to do so. And I think it's important to really think about that, ways that mental illness can manifest, ways that might be extremely helpful for our first responders to know, and to again form that personal relationship so when they are responding, they can do so with individuality and care and concern. So I really appreciate all of the first responders here and their ability and willingness to do so.
So we're going to take one more question from the audience. We have about 7 minutes left, and then we're going to emphasize an invitation to the audience again and do our thank yous. But we're going to go back to Ms. Karen.
One more question, but it's got 3 parts. I know, like, sometimes you go to someone's house, they have a little sign that says there are pets inside. Is there something like that similar for people? Do we have, okay, good. So,
no, we're all smiling because when we first got together to talk about this panel, we were brainstorming about creating some kind of symbol or brand to say, and again, people can elect that either to put it on their car or in the window of their front door to say, hey, there's a different type of alert here that, you know, I remember when I was growing up, I always had the top finder sticker, you know, and I was so excited to get it at home and then put that orange sticker so if there was ever an emergency, the firefighter would know, come here first before you go and say, find my mom and dad, like, come save me. But it's under that same guise that we're thinking. Just, again, another piece of information to say, alert, be aware, proceed. So that's something that we're certainly looking into doing and partnering.
Okay, so my second question, my second part is, when I do this with you, if I'm in a different town and my child gets lost, and I talk to the police there, can I say, contact Simsbury Police, they have all the information, or does that...
So we have the ability. So what we do is we have the ability to not only, we work with our neighboring agencies daily, weekly, we go to yearly training with them. So we have a very an excellent relationship with them. So if we have an emergency, they pick up the phone, their dispatcher calls our dispatcher, and they can actually go through records in an emergency situation and start picking up information. So if your child's lost, let's say Grammy needs to call Simsbury. Grammy calls Simsbury dispatch. The dispatcher runs your child's name. The alert pops up. We can look into it. We will not be able to provide them with every single piece of information, but we will be able to provide them with the critical information, all right? Because again, the big priority is going to be trying to get in point of contact with parents, loved ones, in addition to finding that person.
Thank you.
Thank you. What a great question. So I just wanted to make sure everybody heard the invitation to come on down and meet our first responders, but also to schedule a meet and greet in your home. I think it's really a great idea to have our children actually see a uniformed officer in our living room. That's really cool. And expose your children to sirens and lights. And, I don't want to forget, I always want to come back to what's our responsibility as parents. Take advantage of touch-a-truck events. I know that we have a fire anniversary coming up, right? And I would guess that there's going to be fire trucks and ambulances there. And, come out into the community and get our families out there and meet our first responders where they are at their events too. Come out and support them as well. And this I didn't know. Did you know that you could schedule a play date at the Simsbury Police Department? This is according to the chief. I don't want to get you on officer list. So, yeah, you can't do not drop your children off.
Friday night, 7 o'clock.
They do have meeting rooms at the police department.
Birthday parties?
No birthday parties. But if you want to go down with a small group and have a book club meeting or just spend, don't overstay your welcome, I will say. Just reach out to the police department and verify what I'm telling you. But also call and arrange for a tour of the police department, or can they do it to a fire station, right, or an ambulance? But also think about stopping by and getting a photo ID of your child. Even if you don't go to the extent of filling out the child safety questionnaire, have a photo of your child taken and put it into a profile for your family, even if that's the only piece of information, and make sure you update it frequently so it changes with your child. All right, I'd like to thank our panel. This is great. I just want to remind our audience that there are cards for you to give us ideas for future event discussions, and you can find our Simsbury Septo on our Facebook page. You can contact Sue Lemke's office to make sure that you are on the listserv distribution to receive emails from the district. And just a final reminder, don't wait for an emergency. Prepare today. Thank you.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.